Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here in Aberdeen. And congratulations on beating Celtic last week. No doubt it's been a week of some celebration. Clearly some Aberdeen supporters in the audience. We're very pleased today to be joined by several prominent businessmen and businesswomen who are very, very thoughtful and very, very worried about the future of the oil and gas industry and indeed all the related businesses and industries that go around that, and perhaps what might happen to the future of Aberdeen and the surrounding area itself. Reform has made remarkable strides in Scotland over the course of the last year. We managed to field candidates for every seat in the general election, but to be honest, it was pretty much a paper exercise. Since then, we've managed to build branches. We've been contesting by-elections every Thursday for councils, wherever they come up. We've had a steadily rising score. We, if you believe the polls over the weekend, are beginning to eclipse Labour to be the second most popular party in Scottish politics. And of course, we have the Hamilton by-election taking place this Thursday. But the purpose of this visit, and I guess it was really the news that Harbour Energy were laying off yet more people, the fact that this industry is in serious decline, and that to a large extent it is wholly unnecessary. These are decisions that we have taken here in our own country. The tax rate, the super tax of 75% that was imposed by the Conservatives in the last period of their 14 years of government, was a disaster for the industry. Labour have only added to that by putting it up to 78% and stopping the application of new licences. Yes, the oil price is low at this moment in time, but after 20 years as a commodity trader, these things do move in cycles. 2025 will be a year of record consumption of fossil fuels. We can con ourselves as much as we like. There'll be more coal burnt this year than has ever been burnt in the history of mankind. And the same applies to the use of gas and oil. Even the most ardent proponent of net zero has to accept the world will still be using oil and gas up until 2050 and beyond. And yet we've decided to sacrifice this industry as a consensus around net zero has emerged. Of course, I say net zero, it isn't really net zero. All we're doing is exporting carbon dioxide production. And into the bargain, we are seeing Scotland and many parts of England and Wales literally deindustrialising before our very eyes. Yes, there are arguments around new industries, but for every job created in a new industry, many more have been lost in conventional industries. We now have the most expensive energy prices, commercial energy prices in the world, and the whole thing is complete and utter madness. Richard, Tice and I have been standing up and fighting and speaking on these issues for many, many years. It's also worth adding, shortly after the Prime Minister's so-called EU reset, that if we look across the other side of the North Sea to Norway, not only do we see a country that has championed its oil and gas industry, a country that sells an awful lot of gas to us, a country that also has a 200-mile exclusive economic zone for fisheries. A 200-mile EEZ. Just imagine what anything like that would do for all these towns and cities on the east coast of Scotland. So whichever way we look, we're getting things wrong. They must be laughing themselves silly in Norway that now actually we have to import a significant amount of our electricity from them as well. It is almost, the madness of this is almost completely and utterly beyond belief. One of the reasons that we've been doing well in Scotland is we've been attracting some very, very good, fresh talent. There have been several Conservative councillors that have come to us, and there'll be a Labour councillor coming to us this afternoon when we get to Hamilton. But Duncan Massey has been not just a city councillor here in Aberdeen over the course of the last few years, but somebody who has spent 20 years working in the oil and gas industry, and it's my happy duty to welcome Duncan as a Reform councillor here in the city of Aberdeen today. Duncan, thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Nigel. Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here. Didn't think it would be quite such a big show today with just me joining as a Reform councillor, but obviously my reputation precedes me. So thanks for that. You know, I've joined Reform. I think, like for most people, you know, real concern about the country, the whole country. You know, doesn't feel like it's working. We have a stagnant economy, stagnant wages. As Nigel said, we're deindustrialising pretty rapidly because of net zero. We can't control borders. We can't build things like energy infrastructure or houses or public services. Don't feel like they're working. We've got huge problems and we need massive and urgent change. And I believe that it's only the Reform Party that can bring that change. And I think obviously we've got similar issues across the whole of the UK, but I think in Scotland, you know, we seem to be failing further and faster with an incompetent and devoid of ideas SNP, a sort of entrenched and entitled SNP who've been in power for nearly 20 years, have done nothing but fail, but seem more concerned with the gravy train continuing rather than trying to improve things. And again, I think it's only Reform that can change this dynamic and move Scotland to a place where we can change policies. And obviously, the main reason here in Aberdeen is the impact on the oil and gas industry of Labour and SNP policies. You know, it just feels like deliberate destruction of our industry at the moment. 78% tax, no new licences, large projects caught up in a regulatory limbo. And all at the same time, all Labour and SNP have is gaslighting us with fairy tales about the so-called just transition. You know, as Nigel said, we've got low oil prices now. You know, it feels like it's going to be a bit of a perfect storm. We've seen some redundancies at Harbour. I think it might be a very painful time for the city. And frankly, I don't think most Aberdonians have yet woken up to just how badly we're being treated. And again, I think it's only Reform, by supporting Reform, that we're going to get the changes to our energy policies that we need. So that's my reasons for being here. Delighted to be here and look forward to increasing the Reform vote in Aberdeen.
Now, it's exactly 365 days ago tomorrow that I decided to come out of political retirement and throw myself back into the fray. And in the aftermath of the general election, I had one big political target, which was the English County Council elections. I wasn't very happy that in 9 of our strongest counties the elections were cancelled, but we carried on in what on paper were our weaker areas and achieved a great success on the 1st of May. But carrying the torch for the party here in Scotland over the course of the last year, repeatedly visiting and encouraging and helping these branches to set up and defectors to come across, has been my deputy leader, Richard Tice, somebody who also has spoken out for many, many years on the madness of our net zero policies. Richard.
Good morning. Thank you, Nigel. It's great to have everybody here. It's great to be here in Aberdeen, one of the global centres of energy expertise. And it's no coincidence that when the UK economy was growing every year at 2.5 to 3.5% in the 80s and 90s, yes, we were extracting significant quantities of oil and gas, and Aberdeen and Scotland was doing very well. And it's an absolute tragedy that this energy treasure is essentially being left in the sea, or indeed under our feet on land, because it is a huge, huge opportunity. And the other tragedy, I've just come back from the Middle East, where they are extracting oil and gas as fast as they can go. And guess what? It's making them very wealthy. And we know that oil and gas is a proven winner. It's a proven winner here in Aberdeen, and it's been a proven winner for Scotland. And that's why I think the simple slogan that I coined, "Drill Scotland, drill." You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We know it works, and we should be accelerating it. I'm perhaps a little less polite than Nigel. I now call it net stupid zero. I think it's the greatest act of financial self-harm ever imposed on this nation by people in Westminster. And it's not them that suffer. It's ordinary men and women families and children that suffer in our communities. And that's why we are battling so hard to turn this around. And we're very clear. Our ambition is to win the next general election. And we are polling, almost every poll now, we're polling ahead by 8, 9, 10 points. And here's the thing. If we scrap net zero, and that is our plan, then that is a great opportunity for the oil and gas industry that wants a welcoming government that creates a stable tax environment, a stable regulatory environment, and recognises the huge value that can be extracted from oil and gas. It is still hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds in oil and gas offshore. There's hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds also onshore from shale gas that we should be using. This is our treasure, and we should be using it rather than importing it from overseas, at which time you're also, not only are you deindustrialising our own nation, we're actually creating more CO2 by bringing it from America or wherever. So we've got this great opportunity. We need to change course dramatically. We need to do a complete U-turn, and we need to say to everybody, in particular the oil and gas industry, a reform government will be a government that welcomes investment, welcomes new licences, and we should get ready. We should get ready for those new licences to be granted and approved and to attract investment, equity investment, debt investment. We know it works. We know it's a generator of huge wealth, huge prosperity, and huge opportunity, not just for Aberdeen, but for Scotland. And that's why we're here. And I think that's why, to everybody's surprise, in Holyrood and Westminster, we're doing very, very well here in Scotland. Thank you very much.
OK, we have a long list of media questions, which we are happy to take, starting with James Cook from BBC News.
Thanks very much. Sorry, I was looking for a microphone.
There is one.
There is one. Thank you. Morning, Mr. Farage.
Morning.
These people shouting outside say that you're a racist. Will you reassure them you're not by apologising to the Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar for claiming that he would prioritise the Pakistani community when you must know that he literally said no such thing?
OK, so I can tell you this. We've not heard these sort of chants or tweets in England now for a very, very long time. And indeed, the First Minister, Swinney, was the one that started using this word yesterday in a deliberate, I think, and very, very provocative way. I would remind everybody that the chairman of the party is Scottish-born, but comes from parents who come from the Indian subcontinent. But we don't talk about race at all. We think everybody should be treated equally. We object very strongly to the segmentation of people into different types. And I think, to be frank, that Mr. Sarwar has a record of obsessing on this issue. There was the famous speech that he gave in the Scottish Parliament saying, why are the judiciary white? Why are, these leading figures in Scotland white? A most extraordinary speech, given the statistics and figures here. And actually, I think that speech that he gave was sectarian in its very nature. We are the South Asian community. We are going to take over the country and take over the world.
He didn't say any such thing.
Well, he did actually very, very clearly.
He did not say that the South Asian community would take over the country or the world, nor did he use the word prioritise.
He said...
Why can't I hear what you're saying, but why can't you just accept what he literally said and not mischaracterise what he said?
We believe what he said was a form of sectarian politics, and we don't like it one little bit. Thank you very much indeed. Ben Phillip from BBC Scotland.
Obviously, here in Aberdeen today, Nigel, many will be listening to what you're saying about the oil and gas industry. On the slogan, Drill, Scotland, Drill, is it not the case that that will just make oil and gas companies even wealthier? It's not going to lower bills. How will your policies actually help ordinary people?
Jobs, 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 very well-paid jobs, money in people's pockets, which they'll spend in Aberdeen and elsewhere. And, big companies can make big profits. Big companies can make big losses. It works both ways. This idea that a political party either supports the workers or supports the private companies that put risk capital in is absolute nonsense. The two can't coexist without each other. And what is for certain in Scotland and across the wider United Kingdom is the public sector gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and our overall national finances means that we're getting poorer and poorer and poorer. And just look at GDP per capita over the course of the last few years.
I know, but most of the oil and gas that is extracted from the sea just outside is exported. You know, so something will need to change to the wholesale prices to actually bring bills down for people.
That's a very interesting point. Oil tends to trade on a global market at a global price priced in dollars. The gas market is completely and utterly different, and Richard knows a bit more about what happened in America with gas prices.
Yeah, so it's funny, isn't it? We're told that gas is an international price, so why is the American price of gas about a third of the UK price? Why are therefore their electricity bills about a third to a quarter of our bills? I completely refute your suggestion that being reliant on oil and gas will not bring down bills. We know it will because it did. And there is a direct link between the increase in renewable generating capacity over the last 10 to 15 years and the dramatic increase in electricity prices way above inflation. That is the simple reality, and cheap energy drives everything. It drives investment, it drives businesses, it drives prosperity, and there is a direct link between our high electricity prices and there's just and the renewable generating capacity. And here's the other thing that people won't tell you. The vast majority now, about 2/3 of our electricity price is now policy costs, levies, subsidies, transmission costs, constraint payments, and all of that. The actual wholesale cost is down at somewhere between 30 and 35%. So I'm afraid people are being completely misinformed about the truth.
Yeah, and a political class that have all agreed on everything for year after year after year, and that is why the injection of reform is going to change the whole nature of the debate around economic issues in Scotland. At least I believe that it will and that it should. Christopher McCall, Daily Record.
Hi, Nigel. Back in 2015, during the general election campaign, you said that taxpayers in England were, quote, cheesed off with the amount of public money that goes to Scotland. Can I ask, is that still your view? And if you won power, would you look to scrap the Barnett formula?
The Barnett formula, it seems to me, is really somewhat out of date. What I'd like to see is a Scottish government that's able to raise a bit more of its own revenue and a Scottish economy that has actually got genuine growth. And I don't believe that can happen without this sector booming. All right. And I think, the Barnett formula goes back to the 1970s. Is there an argument it should be looked at again? Of course there is. But, I mean, frankly, if you look at welfare dependency, if you look at educational standards, the idea that sort of 50 billion this year was roughly what the figure's going to be going to Scotland. It isn't going to reduce in the short term until Scotland actually starts to have an economy that is thriving. And right now it's going in completely the wrong direction. Yeah.
Do you support the concept of devolution as the Scottish Parliament?
Oh, yes, devolution's here to stay. And in fact, devolution now is being extended into England, right down to a county basis where we're going to have elected county mayors. No. Devolution is here to stay. Sadly, over the course of the last 20 years or so, devolution doesn't appear to have worked very well. I mentioned education. I could talk about 800,000 plus on the NHS waiting list. It hasn't worked out very well. Doesn't mean devolution's wrong. It means the people running it haven't got it right. Tony Diver, Daily Telegraph.
Farage,
Microphone.
Oh, thank you very much. You said yourself that reform has not been around in Scotland for very long. You said at the last election you ran paper candidates competing in this election. How long is it going to take you to build trust in Scottish people? How long do you think that by this time next year, when Scotland goes to the polls in the Scottish Parliament election, you could win a majority of the Scottish Parliament or even become the second largest party?
Well, I think that if you look at County Durham, where we wiped away the Labour Party on May the 1st, if you look at Staffordshire and Kent, where we erased the Conservative Party, you see we were able in England, with lots of focus and effort, to build a fairly professional, in fact, actually, I'm going to be honest, very professional campaigning team with a good list of vetted candidates. In Scotland, to be frank, Scotland has not had much resource but some very energetic, good local organisers, some great new people of talent and real-world experience joining us. I don't see any reason why we can't do exactly the same thing here. I accept the SNP have a very, very solid baseline vote. I think the Conservative Party in Scotland will wither away. It frankly serves no purpose. And I think the conditions for the Labour vote in many parts of Scotland are not dissimilar to what we saw in County Durham. So, yeah, I'm very optimistic we can make a big run at the Scottish Parliament next year. We've got a lot more to do. You could say right now the party in Scotland is a movement. It's a teenager, hasn't quite yet reached maturity. Maybe the result on Thursday will be the thing that actually gets us to full adulthood. Thank you very much indeed. Simeon Kerr, Financial Times. Sorry, not here. Okay. Asni Maguire, GB News.
Good morning, all three of you. I'm just curious to know what your take is on the role reversal between what was shy reform and then brash or confident nationalist here in Scotland. Now it's very much the other way around. We're seeing people coming out not afraid to voice their support of reform, while the nationalist conversation, especially that around independence, is filtered away a little bit. Just wondered what your take on that and whether that was going to be enough to take you through next year's Holyrood election.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point you raise. Before a sort of general election last year, you probably wouldn't tell the neighbours you're going to vote Reform in case they thought ill of you. If you said, I'm voting Reform, it's all like coming out. It was a really big thing for you to do and something that might cause you, a little bit of friction. What I now see, what I've seen in other parts of the UK, and I believe, I already know that our canvassers are seeing on the streets in Hamilton are people are absolutely saying, yeah, we love it. Why are they so vociferous in their support for reform? Because they believe that everything's broken. It was really what you talked about earlier, that things don't actually work anymore. And they see us as the bright new hope that can come in, and because we have the courage of our convictions, we can turn things around. So there is actually a great sense of optimism around our supporters. Many of the media will say it's just a protest vote. It really isn't a protest vote. These voters that are voting Reform are not just sticking two fingers up. They are actually saying positively, affirmatively, you can turn things around. As for the nationalist vote, look, I'm less qualified to comment. All I would say is that the SNP don't seem to respect the results of any referendums, be they Scottish referendums or EU ones. And whilst this seesawing that's been going on in Scotland between Labour and the SNP has now reversed the other way since the general election, I'm not actually sure whether the depth of support for the SNP hasn't been more of an anti-Labour position in the absence of an alternative, and that's what we are going to try to provide. Do not underestimate over the course of the next year that we can get people who previously voted SNP voting for us, because I genuinely believe that we can. Gina Davison, LBC. No show, fine. Dave Galloway from North Sound Radio.
Thank you, Nigel. Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to ask for your reply to the assertion that SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn has made about your views. He calls them short-sighted stupidity and says you shouldn't be allowed to do to Aberdeen what you've done to the UK economy.
Well, he's entitled to his opinion. On a personal basis, I quite like him, actually. He's got a bit of character. He's got a bit of spirit. And somebody, we get on rather well with him, actually. We have a bit of fun with them. They sit right in front of us. We just don't happen to agree. I think the short-sightedness is for Scotland to turn its back on an industry that for over half a century has been providing so many jobs and so much wealth. If it was the end of oil and gas, if we weren't going to use oil and gas in a few years' time, it would be a perfectly valid thing to do. That is not the case, and I repeat the point, and you can give it to Stephen if you like, that 2025 will be a record year for fossil fuel consumption globally. We may not like that fact, but it's there. And actually, I think we're the ones with an economic vision that can make people genuinely better off.
And just on the subject of carbon capture, why do you believe that scrapping the Acorn project, which can create thousands of jobs and attract billions of pounds of investment, is a good idea?
Look, I've been hearing about carbon capture. I've been hearing about battery storage for wind farm energy. And I've been hearing these arguments now since about 2000. For about a quarter of a century, I've been told these things will work. They are going to work. I have not as yet seen any evidence that carbon capture will actually work. And by the way, if I do, I will change my mind.
Could I just add one point to that?
Sure.
Which is that even the Greens are not supportive of carbon capture. And I think that tells you a lot about their perception as to whether or not the technology will ever work.
Yeah. One technology that does work, of course, is nuclear. And maybe you can ask Stephen Flynn about that, because I think what you're seeing across the Western world is quite a marked shift. It started in America, we're seeing it in Europe now as well, quite a marked shift of public attitudes towards nuclear energy, given that it gives continuous baseload power 24/7, 365 days a year. And we certainly think that the development of the small modular nuclear reactor, I mean, every submarine's got one. We haven't quite got there yet with it, but I think that probably long term, in terms of reliable energy, is going to be our salvation, because I don't want Scotland or the United Kingdom to go through what Spain has just been through. Spain, who of course have boasted about having the highest level of renewables of any country in the world. Thank you very much indeed. Neil Poran from the Press Association.
Morning.
Good morning.
Both Anas Sarwar and John Swinney have said they would debate you. Would you be willing to debate them? And if not yourself, when do you think you would have a Scottish leader for reform who could maybe do that?
Would I debate them? Will you hold my jacket? I'll be delighted to. Of course I'll be delighted to. When are we going to have a Scottish leader? I think I can refer you back to the answer that I gave the Telegraph, that we are a mid-teenage year political movement that is evolving in Scotland into a fully fledged political party, the way that it has south of the border, because of our emphasis on it with the run-up to May the 1st. All in good time is the answer to your question. And by the way, I do want Reform Scotland to be as autonomous as it possibly can be, and that is absolutely our intention. All right. Very, very good. Michael Andrew Blackley from the Scottish Daily Mail.
Hello, thank you. Good morning. There was more polling for the Scottish Parliament elections out at the weekend. You've got a sizable share of the vote, but it's pretty clear from that polling that the SNP, despite collapsing compared to 2021, is still going to win by a mile. So are you concerned that actually you could be the man to save the SNP and give them another term at Holyrood?
Well, even if we didn't exist, I think you'd find the Labour vote next year would be significantly down from where it was in the general election of 2024. We are a fresh voice in Scottish Parliament, making different arguments, as you can see this morning on this stage, to those that are being made by the other political parties. And you know what? Even in opposition in Holyrood, and even in the run-up to those elections, I think one of the things that I would stand on the track record that Richard and I have got, is we're actually quite good at shifting national debate and shifting government policy, regardless whether we're in power or not. So I believe we can have a significant impact on policy from now going all the way through. And by the way, on oil and gas, on the whole net zero debate, this is almost the next Brexit, where you have, you have Westminster, you've had Edinburgh, you have Cardiff, all have been wedded to one particular point of view. Us, as the minority voice inside those institutions, but increasingly a majority voice out in the rest of the country. Believe me, the scales are falling off the eyes of the public when it comes to net zero. They realise that we are putting upon ourselves a massive cost, let alone the opportunity cost of what we're missing, when we globally produce less than 1% of global carbon dioxide, that percentage falling every single year. And when they actually understand that when we close down refineries, think Grangemouth, when we close down steel works, think Scotland going back a few years, all we're doing is exporting the emissions of CO2 with the goods then being shipped back to us. The public are waking up to this, and very, very quickly, I might argue. Conor Gillies from Sky News.
Mr Farage, Anas Sarwar has called you a pathetic, poisonous little man. John Swinney says you're not really interested in Scotland. Are they right? And second of all, have you ruled out standing for Holyrood next year?
I have ruled out standing for Holyrood next year. I am not a Scot. Beyond playing golf and attempting to catch salmon and a few bits of family, I don't have Scottish connections. Even when I was in business, I didn't have much. I had some, but not much north of the border. So I will not be standing for Holyrood. That would be wrong in every way. And do you know what? The more they insult me, the more I know we must be doing something right. And I think they're in a blind state of panic. They're chucking around all sorts of insults. I thought the First Minister yesterday was frankly insightful in what he said. But for today, I will not return the compliment. We'll let the public make their own minds up. I'm not going to get involved in a war of words.
But do you think you started that by mischaracterising Anas Sarwar's words, just to follow up on what James said earlier?
No, Mr Sarwar seems to be obsessed with race. You know, I've mentioned this already to the BBC man sitting on your right. Speeches in the Parliament about why is everybody white? You know, what's wrong with Scotland? And we just don't see things like that. And I think that speech was a sectarian speech.
You know what the context of that speech was?
I don't know.
So you're putting...
Oh, yes, I do. It was the independence. Pakistani independence. Yes, it was. Yeah, OK, I get that. But...
The speech in Parliament was about Pakistani independence.
The speech that he gave when he talked about the South Asian community and what we can do. I think our view is that we ought to be as colourblind and as race blind as we possibly can be. You know, people have their own private practices and religions.
With respect, though, you're the party that are putting out videos about race.
Well, we didn't start it. No, you asked me, did I start it? No, he did. Of that, I have no doubt at all. Stephen Brown, STV News.
Morning. You've come here spoken an awful lot about oil and gas, very little about renewables. What is your investment plan for renewables, indeed for the 50,000 people in Scotland who are now directly and indirectly employed in renewables? Some of them will be concerned about your rhetoric around net zero and what that might mean for their future jobs.
Well, I don't mind renewables. If renewables work and can stand on their own 2 feet, that's fantastic. But at the moment it can't, it never has done, and it's directly contributed to energy bills being, as I've said already, the most expensive industrial energy in the world, which is disastrous throughout all levels of industry. So if renewables can stand on their own 2 feet, good, but let's not con ourselves. You know, these wind turbines aren't being made here, these solar panels aren't being made here. I think there are some very serious questions. Going ahead, as I've answered already to local radio, you know, if we can make these renewable energies work, if we can make, battery storage, if this stuff can work, fine. And investment will continue to go into those areas. But to make ourselves too reliant on intermittent energy would be a massive, massive strategic mistake.
And you've spoken about the idea of oil and gas licences in the future, potentially requiring an equity stake within that from government.
Yeah.
How much taxpayer money are you willing to throw at oil and gas licences in the future, which by their very nature, as the oil and gas declines in the North Sea, will become far riskier?
There is risk to it. There is this, but the rewards are absolutely enormous. Just look at the way Norway's approached its whole industry. They had stakes in these right from the very start. They've had a sovereign wealth fund. We just need to look across the North Sea to see some very good examples of how things can be done. Thank you very much. Alistair Clark of the Courier.
Morning. You're referring to 2 speeches that you say Anas Sarwar made. The second of those, are you sure you're not referring to one that Hamza Yousaf made in Parliament? Secondly, for Councillor Massey, if I may, the Tories and SNP have fought between Aberdeen seats up here for a long time. What do you think's gone wrong with the Scottish Conservatives that you've decided to leave?
Look, I'm not going to delve any more deeply into comments by Mr Sarwar about me, or indeed the First Minister. I think we've said enough on that. Scottish Conservatives have stood for nothing for a very, very long time. They haven't had the courage to stand up against some of the stupidities that have been done in Scotland, but maybe our former Conservative councillor, as half an hour ago, can answer it better than me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think, the SNP are doubling down on their anti-oil and gas record. I think it was only the other day when, for the SNP said that they were, fully focused on net zero. I think, going back to Conservatives, obviously I've got respect for my Conservative colleagues, but I think they have failed to set out a vision for Scotland and for the UK, and I think Reform has done that and is doing that, and, we're very much in Scotland the start-up party that is pushing ahead with sensible policies for energy and for oil and gas.
Thank you. Stephen Carroll from The Guardian. We take a lot of questions here, don't we?
Hello, it's Stephen Carell from The Guardian. Mr Farage, can I just clarify something about Reform policy on oil and gas extraction and coal extraction? Is it Reform's policy that all oil, gas and coal should be extracted worldwide? And what is the Reform's analysis of the impact that's going to have on climate heating, which tens of thousands of scientists are absolutely clear is proof is happening now and is causing deaths worldwide?
We are less than 1% of global CO2 production. That number falls every single year. I think it would make more sense to use the coal that could have been produced in Cumbria and taken across to Scunthorpe to keep the steel plant open. I think it makes more sense to produce that coal in Cumbria than it does to import it from Japan. And I think even in terms of the CO2 argument, I think that argument actually is a winner. And we have to face up to the realities that China, Indonesia, India are using more fossil fuels. Coal, take coal. We're going to burn, mankind this year is going to burn 8 billion tonnes of coal. I share with you reservations about what this is doing to the atmosphere. I share those reservations. But does it make sense to commit economic hara-kiri in this country whilst this is happening across the rest of the world? No. Better to refine in this country, better to produce chemicals in this country, better to manufacture cement, other products, steel, other products that use an enormous amount of energy, better to produce it here under better environmental standards than produce it in India and China under much lower standards and then ship the goods back to the UK. And I'm just trying, Sir Severin, I'm just trying to be rational and logical.
Can I just go back
of course.
To the first question? What is the Reform strategy on the position on maximising oil and gas and coal extraction worldwide? Because if you say it's good for Scotland, then presumably it's good for everybody else too.
Well, it's good for Scotland. No. Let's get back to logic. If we're going to use gas in Scotland and elsewhere, there's a strong argument to say we should produce it ourselves, make lots of jobs, and get lower energy bills. And that's the argument that we will go on making, and I think the public increasingly support us. The Herald I'm going to speak to last for fairly obvious reasons outside. Alexander Ellards from The National.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
So last year, Labour suspended around 10% of the weapons export licences to Israel. The following day, writing for GB News, you questioned whether Israel was really still an ally of the UK. I'm just wondering if you can expand on that, just outline your foreign policy position on Israel and Palestine.
I'm sorry, that's wrong. I said it the other way round. It wasn't whether Israel was an ally of the UK, it's whether the UK was an ally of Israel, and I say that after the British hostage case, where I did meet the family, I did make very, very strong representations to the British public to say, look, this Damari case, we need to wake up to this. I did my best through American media to make them aware there was a British hostage. And I think what you'll find is that the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, met with the family and gave a fairly underwhelming response. So my question then, and as you say, we are going back a bit, my question then was, are we really an ally of Israel's anymore? I know that since then things have deteriorated, and even some of Israel's strongest friends in the world are asking some quite serious questions.
I guess that's my question then. If you were at the head of the UK government, what would your position on Israel and Palestine be? Would you label their actions in Gaza a genocide?
No.
Would you suspend all arms licences?
No, I wouldn't. And I think, we have to get back to a fundamental fact that what happened on the 7th of October was the most appalling barbarism committed by an organisation who say they will do it again and again and again. No, easy answers. I accept that. I'll just say one more quick thing, if I may. Very, very interesting to see some quite senior American generals over the course of the weekend talking about the new EU Defence Pact, which Starmer is signing us up to. There are still more details to come. But when you get senior American NATO generals, retired, saying that an EU force is a distraction to NATO, I would suggest we should start to get very, very worried indeed and face the reality that in terms of defence, yes, of course, increased defence spending, provided it's procured properly, is a good thing and is very, very important and very necessary, a bit like paying the insurance on the house. Without the Americans, we are defenceless. And the more we push down this EU route, the more sceptical the Americans are becoming about our independent role. Right, OK, where are we going next? We've got Rachel Amory from The Scotsman.
Good morning. Looking at the by-election this week, if Reform comes third behind Labour and the SNP, is that a failure in your eyes? And if Reform does win and we see a Reform MSP in Holyrood, will we see more sort of personalised attacks on other MSPs from that candidate?
You're giving a fairly wide range of expectations there. Are we going to win it or have a disaster? I mean, you pays your money, you takes your choice. From what I understand, there's been no proper polling done within the constituency whatsoever. We just don't know. Are we confident of coming third? Yes. Are we confident of coming second? Well, I don't know, but if we do, it'll be a very nice surprise. Do I realistically think we can win? Well, if we do, then that will be the biggest earthquake Scottish politics has probably ever seen. But you never know. Anything on a low turnout election with a disenchanted electorate, I guess it's not impossible, but I think it's improbable. Stuart Patterson from the Scottish Sun.
Hi, Mr. Farage. You describe yourself as being down to earth, but why then have you kicked off your campaigning in Scotland today in a restaurant where people are paying up to 30 quid for a fish and chips?
To try and protect ourselves from the howling mob that have been stirred up by the First Minister and others. So we thought it better to do it here than do it in a high street.
But there are loads of other places you could go.
Well, you all seem to have turned up and you look very comfortable and you're enjoying yourself, so I don't think we got it that wrong, do you?
And what would you do as a kind of flip side to that? What would Reform do for your honorary punter to bring down the price of a fish supper in Scotland?
Reduce the price of energy. And one of the things you are seeing is fish and chip shops all over the United Kingdom literally having to close. Such is the cost of energy. Energy is very much at the centre of the centre. We believe that it's led. We know that it's led in America to the most incredible increase in personal wealth over the course of the last decade, and we'd like to try and do the same here. Thank you. Now, the Herald. Now, Andrew Learmouth, it seems that you're involved with this group of protesters outside.
No.
Well, it's funny, isn't it, that you come, and your newspaper also manages to have another one of your correspondents as a protest correspondent. So you knew more about this than we did.
That's not true at all, Nigel. Sorry.
Really?
Absolutely not. So we have two reporters in Aberdeen.
Well, thank you.
Come on now.
And they're both here. Very good.
I've got two reporters going to Hamilton today as well.
You must have so much money and so many staff. It must be remarkable. Do carry on.
Just to be clear, we've got a couple of reporters here as well.
Have you? Right. Well, no.
Absolutely.
Well, no, fair enough. If you say that, I believe you.
I don't know that you do believe me, but I didn't. But I don't know what I was going to ask. Yeah, well, let's talk about the protest.
Well, this location was only sent to you guys. It wasn't put out on the public wires. We didn't put it out to our membership, and yet they knew. So it came from one of you.
Well, people were tweeting about it. Oh, well, it's not.
Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Well, let's talk about the protest, because I'm not entirely clear what you were accusing John Swinney of earlier when you talked about him inciting or his insightful language. What, are you saying that he's putting you at risk or something? What's?
Well, he used the racist word, didn't he? You know, despite the fact, as I've pointed out, we have many members from all communities, some of whom are in very senior positions within our party. According to the experts, we got more BAME, if you believe in all this, more BAME voters in the last general election than the Liberal Democrats, and we get even more this time. We just want to live in a country where everybody is treated equally, everybody is treated on merit, regardless of race, sexual preference, or whatever else it may be. And as for outside, well, you know who they are. They're Antifa. at least half of them wearing face coverings, which I don't think should be allowed, do you? Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Let's go.